Good morning, welcome to Sports Radio 1310, The Ticket. George DiGianni, Train Station Fitness Show. Next to me is Dr. Jeremy Webster. I touted during the week how this is going to be there's going to be a surprise in this show. It's going to be the biggest surprise since the inception of the Train Station Fitness Show. But what we'll start with first is something that's extremely important for everyone who cares about their health. And you say, well, George, everybody cares about their health. Well, not necessarily, right? There are people who just don't take, they'll go on a diet for a week or a day or a month and then they give up. So you obviously really don't care.
And there's people that don't care, period, George. I remember about 10 years ago, I was at a party and my wife mentioned that, Jeremy doesn't eat fried food, or Jeremy doesn't eat rolls wrapped in tortilla and fried in oil.
Yeah.
And a guy just looked at me. He was 100 pounds overweight. He said, why? And I just kind of was like, I didn't even know what he was asking. I was like, is he really curious as to why that's bad for me?
Well,
or does he not?
Amy actually told me this story. She said that you told him to look in a mirror.
I didn't say that.
I remember.
I did not say that.
That distinctly.
No. I was confused. I was like, does he not know that that's bad for him? Or does he just wonder why I care that that's not good for him?
So, similar story happened to me years ago. I was interested in this girl. I was flirting with her, and then she talked about smoking pot and having this food, this and that. And I said, well, that's not for me. I'm not interested in that. And by, I don't know, maybe a minute later, she goes like this. She makes a square, however she did it with her hands. And I said, what's that? She said, you're square, meaning I'm a nerd that I wouldn't. Oh, there's something wrong with me that I won't eat like crap, drink like,
Get pot and eat Cheetos?
Yeah, give me a break. But all too often, there are people that are unhappy with their fitness level, their overall health. They're searching for the latest and greatest fitness and exercises and equipment and diet craze to, quote unquote, change them, right? Mm-hmm. What we're attempting to do today is share with you there are certain staples in health that have never changed, will never change in my lifetime, as long as the body processes and moves in a certain way that it has the last 1,000 years of modern man. Dr. Webster and I are going to discuss the never changing, I'll stick with that, information you need to know before adopting a diet, exercise program, the latest supplement, or change your life due to a study that you heard about in the media or read for yourself. It is my deep desire, and please pay attention to this, my last attempt to help you think for yourself instead of falling into the sheeple pit and following a friend's path, mainstream media, anyone really who has MD or PhD behind their name. We're going to discuss which doctors to seek, who understand more than their limited scope they were taught in med school versus those who know how to treat equally as much as they focus on and aware of prevention. We will also share the staples of what hasn't changed in nutrition and exercise. And then lastly, I, George DiGianni, take a bow and exit stage left after 21 years on the Train Station Fitness Show. Woo-hoo. That will be maybe the last part of the second segment and the entire last segment. So, Doc, let's begin talking about the type of doctor people need to seek, because when we talk about foundational tools, I think there's a specific type of doctor, but there are specific type of doctors to seek that will be incongruent with what a traditional medical doctor tests for, how they look at tests, and what their recommendations are.
Okay, what's the goal here? What's the requirement?
Let me start it off. Functional medicine doctor, DO, chiropractor with a focus on nutrition. Mm-hmm. It's literally just naming the doctors to seek when you're looking to have overall health and wellness benefit and real information, okay. Not what's spewed in the studies that are supposedly real, that have been torn apart many times.
Well, I guess the first thing I'd comment is you have to seek the doctor that fits your needs and your requirements at the time. If you're hit by a bus, don't seek a homeopath.
Well, so we're talking about health and fitness today.
We are.
Okay, so let's stick with that,
okay.
Right? So we're talking about that overall health. Someone's going to seek out a doctor, and they want to make sure that they're getting the right information about their blood work, and they heard this in the news. Is this correct about cholesterol or fat or this pill? I think it's imperative we find a doctor who understands the medication, so they have that background. Very, very important. But you also have a doctor who went outside of his or her scope of training and learned about the preventative side, so they can give you a holistic approach with their information.
Well, I guess since we're in the state of Texas, I would say a functional medicine doctor meets the needs that you're talking about. If we were somewhere else, I might say a naturopath in certain instances.
Right.
In the state
Back
of Texas,
west.
in the state of Texas, naturopaths aren't recognized or licensed, so a lot of naturopath doctors then seek some other kind of certificate or licensure in the state of Texas. They might get a certified nutrition license, for instance, so that they can practice and they can help people.
Which is unfortunate because they know so much
is.
more than a certified nutrition.
That's true. In any case, they still often can practice in one way or another. A nutritionist can be very much like a dietitian in some ways, where they just have the basics of you need this protein, this carbs, this amount of fat. Very basic in nature. Or they could be much more like they can go down the functional route, and it can be a very different experience. They can take advantage of known physiology, known scientific studies, and utilize that to their advantage, so that you can seek them for problems that maybe you would have thought would have been in the realm of a medical doctor. For instance, blood pressure. That seems like a medical doctor's field,
role,
right?
yeah.
Medical doctor's role. Well, if you understand what causes blood pressure, and it's not one thing, by the way, it's many, many potential things. If you understand that and you can intervene in a way to positively affect these biochemical pathways or this part of your physiology, you can affect something like blood pressure without having to take a medication in all instances. That doesn't mean you shouldn't take medication, doesn't mean you shouldn't seek medical doctor attention, because in some cases it's blood pressure being elevated is a medical emergency. If your blood pressure is 180 over 110, don't seek a naturopath, don't seek a chiropractor, go to an emergency room now, because if you don't, you might have a stroke 1 hour from now and be dead or paralyzed for the rest of your life.
Right, but just looking at you're talking about an acute situation.
Right, and I'm just trying to differentiate here.
Right, very important. But overall health, when somebody goes to a regular traditional medical doctor and they go in for their annual exam, they can do the same thing with an integrative medicine doctor, a functional medicine doctor, a DO in certain states, a naturopath doctor in certain states. They don't have to have separate doctors if you find somebody who has both. That's all I'm getting.
Yeah, and that's right. Your medical doctor could have a functional medicine background,
right,
but he's not necessarily going to.
Right.
What a medical doctor goes to school for is not functional medicine. They learn the basic physiology and the biochemistry, no doubt about it. They have the foundation for it, but they're not taught how to apply it in a functional way where they might say, okay, your blood pressure, George, is only 10 or 15 points higher than optimal. So they go to school and say, well, since somebody in an acute stage, we give them medication to bring it down from 180 down to 140 where they're not going to have a stroke. It seems like the same way if your blood pressure is 130 and you want to bring it down to 115, we just use the same medication. That's kind of how that's their mind, is they use the same tools when they're trying to affect long-term health that they did in an acute or crisis or emergency situation. And that's not always the wisest thing to do. Use the medication in an emergency situation, but then use functional tactics when it's a functional problem.
Right.
Different tool, different job.
Right. And a traditional medical doctor will not agree with some of what a functional or integrative medicine doctor follows. They will resist in many cases. I'm generalizing here. They don't understand, and they won't take time to look at the studies the way you want them to get back to you, because they don't have the time. So that's important to know, right? Make sure just because somebody has doctor doesn't mean they're God. That doesn't mean they know everything, right? We need to interview them. They shouldn't be telling us and then you jump when they say how high. So let's get into trainers now, personal trainers.
That's your expertise.
So, well, you can expand upon this.
I can,
When it comes to the service
I
industry,
don't know the specific certifications or any of that. I don't know what to look for in general.
It's not even that as much as it is having a minimum of 3 national certifications when it comes to a personal trainer. And even people who can't afford a personal trainer as an ongoing basis, you can find one who will write a program for you, and you can go back maybe every 3 months for a refresher. You might be able to afford that.
Wait, you don't need somebody to sit there and count to 10 as you're doing your reps and then
So,
say, "Good job."
Which brings me to
Take
one
a
of the
30-second
points.
rest.
Which brings me to one of the points I was going to discuss in here, and thank you for saying that. It's one thing to have a trainer who counts for you. It's another one who cues the muscle being used, who stops you even if it's every repetition when you're doing it incorrectly, not because you have to live in this this box, if you will, but because when you're doing it incorrectly, you might be changing the primary mover you intend to work and/or create injury. So kind of hard to say, even though I'm filming this right now. I might even put it on YouTube if I can download it that way, because it's going to be a long video. But it's something called breaking the back. And Dr. Stuart McGill out of Waterloo, Canada, who's a professor of spine biomechanics, talks about this, that when you get this, when your back is not in its neutral position, especially when it's loaded with weight on your back or in any position that can tax the back, if you even move it a half inch off the way it's supposed to be, so you begin to flex forward, if you will,
Right.
you're in trouble now.
No doubt about it.
You're in trouble, and you know that as a chiropractor. Even if you're moving the weight, or when your knees come in toward the midline, they start to collapse a little, and you're able to still move the weight up and down. Doesn't mean you're strong enough to do it, because if you were, your knees would not move together. So,
would you say that the best trainers focus on
mechanics,
proper utilization of the muscles rather than moving the weight necessarily?
So they should, and
Yeah.
what often happens is you'll get clients that resist and don't want to know. Don't stop me every time. I just want to get a freaking workout. They'll give you a lot of resistance, and you have to decide with your integrity and your business acumen as is in this field whether or not to keep that client. Now, I was known as the trainer who would fire clients.
Okay.
That was because of ego and insecurity many years ago when I did that. But I built a reputation for myself that if you came to me, you were going to work hard, you were going to listen even outside of the gym, you would get results, because then I would look bad if you didn't. That was my ego, that was my insecurity, but it just happened to be something that built a good reputation for me in that part of the business.
An example that I can give for this, when
Yeah.
I said muscles versus moving the weight, when you watch somebody do something like there's 2 examples I can think of: a bent over dumbbell row, or even a cable pull down. I see people oftentimes worrying so much about just simply getting the bar when they're doing a pull down. As long as they're getting the bar below their chin, that's all they care about.
And
They
then
think
they
that's
collapse.
a good rep.
Right.
Or when they're doing the dumbbell row, they just worry about getting the weight up to a certain point, like maybe to their chest.
Right.
And I say, don't worry about where the weight is. Worry about contracting your back muscles, pulling your elbow back, and don't even think about where the weight is.
Right.
Worry about the muscles moving
Right.
the
So
weight.
since I have video here right now, I'll give you an example. With Dr. Webster saying, you have a bar in front of you, you're about to do some lat pull downs, you pull the bar down. You're supposed to stop at the point where your body maintains form, whatever that form is that the trainer told you to maintain, where your chest is up and your back is erect and all that other good stuff, and not pull the bar down so much that you begin to collapse and bend forward, because now you've changed the primary mover and it's not safe on your shoulders. So there's all that. Without getting an alternative, but a minimum of 3 national certifications. The 2 I'll mention right now, well, there's 3. One is just about anything from Paul Chek or Tom Purvis. They're the top trainers in the industry right now, and have been for a while. Number 2 is NASM, National Academy of Sports Medicine. They should have advanced degrees from that, because there are different levels. And then ACSM, Academy of College and Sports Medicine. Those are the biggest, and actually ACSM is the biggest. You're pretty darn intelligent, way beyond a trainer if you have ACSM certifications.
Are we going to get into core very much today, or
No, not
okay.
at all.
Then
No.
let me mention.
It's finding the professionals and
Yeah,
understand.
okay.
Go, you want to talk about
I just
that?
want to. No, we don't need to get into it, because there's new information. Look up the McGill Big 3. It's Stuart McGill that you
Well, I
mentioned.
talked about this on the
biomechanics.
show. Yeah, the
We
Big
did,
3.
but just people, not everybody heard that show,
Yeah.
so I just want to bring up. Simply look up the Big 3. That seems to be the gold standard now in core training, and he's updated how you do it. It's no longer a long minute and a half hold.
Right.
It's 10-second intervals.
Right.
It's safer that way. It's still equally effective, but you won't have the problem of potentially having fatigued core muscles and injuring yourself the following day.
So, just to break down a little bit what Dr. Webster's saying, when you're in a plank position on the ground, Holding it as long as you possibly can is not beneficial. Dr. McGill is the one who invented the plank, by the way. And so for him to come in and revise his findings and say, look, not only is it not beneficial, but you can make yourself weaker when you go to perform other exercises. What you want to do is hold a plank position for 10 seconds, no longer, but many repetitions of those 10 seconds.
It's like 10 seconds and then a second or two rest, and then another 10 seconds of plank.
Let's go into a nutritionist now. What does someone look for? What do they need to know when it comes to the foundation of a nutritionist? Not nutrition, a nutritionist, and that is a chiropractor with a focus on nutrition. Earlier we talked about naturopath doctor, functional medicine doctors. What else would you like to contribute to that?
A certified clinical nutritionist is generally very well versed in the same things that I would be, or a naturopath.
Talk about the disadvantages real fast about a dietitian, because there's a complete difference. A registered dietitian is more governed by our government, right? They have their rules and regulations that they follow, even with medications. So therefore, you're getting more of your traditional medical doctor information versus a clinical certified nutritionist. They're not the same thought process.
A dietitian would generally be the person that's developing the terrible diets that you would see in a nursing home or hospital or school lunch program. That's a dietitian. Look at the stuff that they're putting on the menu. It's awful. It's not nutritious.
Yeah.
It comes from silly guidelines for like the American Heart Association or Diabetic Association, which if you look at their diets, they're more promoting the disease that they're sponsoring than anything. I mean, maybe there's something to that. But no, I don't have that much respect. I think they're so extraordinarily outdated. I do know some dietitians who have gone the functional medicine route. They have the background to be a great clinician. But most of them go the opposite direction.
So I was charged with, by a very, very good friend of mine, bringing food to her mother in the hospital a few days ago. Her mother's in her late 70s, maybe early 80s, I don't recall, or I don't ever know, really. And
are you saying Salisbury steak pudding and Texas toast is not a nutritious meal?
Can I tell you worse?
It's all worse. And
worse.
The fruit cocktail, you have to have your vegetables.
And she said she wants certain food. Don't give me a hard time about it. Just bring it. And she didn't say it that way. I shouldn't say that. She just wanted me to get it for her mother and wanted to know if I could help her because she couldn't get down there. So I had to go to one of these fast food restaurants and get a fish sandwich, fried by the way, with all the crap on it. Yeah. A medium fry.
Vegetables.
And a Coke.
Good.
Yeah. And so, did I get it or did I not get it?
It's the 4 food groups.
Did I buy it for her or not?
Of course you did.
Of course I did. Dang it. I was fighting it all the way. So I bring it down there, and she was real appreciative because she wasn't eating anything else. She just was craving this really bad food. Nurse comes in to give her some pain medication. What does she wash it down with, water or Coke?
Coke, of course.
Of course.
Because the caffeine stimulates it.
Do you know I lost more eyebrow hair and hair on my head because of that? It's like the hardest thing I've ever had to do, but it put a smile on her face, and I was fine with it.
When you're driving to the hospital with that bag in the seat, were you tempted?
It smelled my car. I had every window open in the car, and it was raining. Okay, so coming up next, Dr. Webster and I are going to talk about studies, what you need to look for when it comes to a study. Just because someone put on a study and they have doctor behind their name, there are 1,000 doctors behind it and 1,000 people involved in the study, does that mean you need to change your life? We'll talk more about what to look for. 709 Sports Radio 1310, The Ticket.
The World Health Organization said air pollution kills 7 million people per year. Our body has a natural ability to detoxify. However, it wasn't designed to handle the constant burden of unhealthy food and air pollution. To tackle this problem, we created the Keto Cleanse. Ketosis occurs when your body runs out of carbohydrate stores and begins using fat for energy. The Keto Cleanse forces your body to produce ketones, which naturally switches you from a carb burner to a fat burner. You won't miss unhealthy carbs when you add high fat such as bacon, cheese, guacamole, and other favorite foods to help you become a fat burner. And for the nerd in you, we'll provide the science of how this process works. You won't feel restricted by the food you love on the Keto Cleanse. Tim Tebow loves keto. Check out the video on our site. Visit 21daybodymakeover.com/keto now and click on Keto Cleanse. You'll receive cleanse supplements, a keto cookbook with desserts such as keto brownies, and grocery lists, recipes, and exercise videos. That's 21daybodymakeover.com/keto.
16 Sports Radio 1310, The Ticket. George DiGianni, Train Station Fitness Show. Next to me is Dr. Jeremy Webster. We're talking about foundational health tools, and today is my final show on the radio at the Ticket. In a little while, we will take calls. If you're happy, then you can tell me, go to hell. If you're not happy, then, hopefully I can help you in some other way. Dr. Webster and I started doing some Facebook Live shows. So visit 21 Day Body Makeover, and you can watch those past shows that we put on. I think they'll be very beneficial for you. So 888-787-1310 is the phone number to call if you want to give a shout out to us. I'd love to hear from you. There's been a lot of people who have listened throughout the world. You may not know this, Dr. Webster, but I'll talk about those people a little later on the internet. Anyway, all too often people are unhappy with their fitness level, their health, and they're grabbing for the latest and greatest fitness craze and supplement and food and diet and all that other stuff, but they don't recognize there are certain staples of the body, how it processes food, like your macronutrients, your fat, your protein, your carbohydrates, and it's not going to change anytime soon or even in our lifetime. So we've been discussing the professionals to seek, the type of personal trainer, the type of doctor, the type of nutritionist to seek, what they should have that helps you to stay on the path that we've been talking about, and I've been talking about for 21 years. Dr. Webster's been with me for about 10 years. Right now we're getting into studies. Just because a study comes out doesn't mean it's credible. Let me just go off on this tangent real fast, Doc.
Good.
A study, what to look for with a study is who funded it, how many people were involved, does their lifestyle match yours, did they have any limitations, what about their culture, their age, and was it controlled? One of the things we know with people who have a truly controlled study when it comes to food is they often go to mental institutions because that's the only place where their food is actually controlled. I don't know if you know that.
Great point, George. Controlled, yes. You can't get good, reliable information from taking a survey and asking what somebody has eaten for the past 10 years.
Right.
It doesn't mean much.
So with that in mind, does the outcome of any study suggest that you should follow it to achieve your desired outcome when you're not those people? Were you involved in the study? Do they know you? Do they know your limitations? What was omitted? Very important. What was not considered? And does it make sense to follow a 6 or 12-week outcome for the rest of your life?
Oh, good point. I don't even know which one to start with. So let me start with this one, George. We got into a discussion recently about post-workout protein.
Oh, yes.
And I have been in the same camp you were in, and almost everybody out there listening, if you have any kind of background in fitness or nutrition, you probably think that post-workout protein is important. Here's why. There were some studies done a long time ago that showed that post-workout protein was highly beneficial. The only problem with that was they used only elderly men, and they used only elderly men that were doing aerobic training only. They were not doing heavy weight training, intense training whatsoever. It was purely based on aerobic exercise in elderly men. They've then extrapolated that to say, well, therefore, since they benefited from this post-workout protein, then a 25-year-old bodybuilder should have post-workout protein, and it's going to be the most important protein of their day. That study didn't do anything to even suggest that conclusion. And in fact, the study itself didn't conclude that. But over time, it's that one study that was very specific with the group of people and how they were training. It's expanded in the minds of trainers, nutritionists, doctors to mean that everybody else needs post-workout protein and that's going to be highly important.
So to be a little incongruent, and I don't have the information with me now, but there are actual updated studies that support the importance of having protein after you work out within a 45-minute window.
There are. I agree with you on that. But when you compare that protein, post-workout protein, within 45 minutes of after workout, it's important. It is helpful.
Yeah.
But when you compare it to protein that's taken before a workout, it's no more helpful than pre-workout protein. It's also no more important than protein taken within 3 hours after the workout.
So that's the part where we disagree, and I
You
don't
get
have
benefits
it with me.
no matter when you take your protein.
So when we do another Facebook Live and I have this information in front of me, the people listening right now could follow that and make up their own mind. But just a study in general, without defining what the study is, it's just saying, look at all of these considerations, especially, if you didn't write all of that down because I went through it kind of fast, of course, or any of this stuff, part of that we discussed in the beginning of the show, go to iTunes. It'll be on podcast or even iHeartRadio. At George DiGianni, rate and subscribe to the show. Again, this is my last radio show at the Ticket. If it's your first time listening or you haven't listened in a while, letting you know that I will not be on the Ticket anymore. If you want to call in, you certainly can. 888-787, and we'll talk with you here. So let me finish that. 888-787-1310, and we will talk with you. What other considerations about studies do people need? Did I cover all of it or no?
Well, a lot of people want it to be in a peer-reviewed journal, a published peer-reviewed journal.
But there are peer-reviewed journals that have omitted information. They don't. All of the variables that have to be considered in a study could cost $1 billion.
I know, and that's why I say a lot of these things, these criteria, you can't always have. You can't always have a double-blind, placebo-controlled study. Some things can't be studied that way.
Right.
Einstein's theory of relativity wasn't necessarily studied that way, but it doesn't mean that the science wasn't valid. Okay, you don't have to have 2,000 people in a trial in order to get good evidence. Sometimes there's 2,000 people in a trial, but it was set up in a crappy manner, and you can't get good, useful information. Right. Whereas other people do a less expensive, more reasonable, and it might only have 20 people. But if you do a study with 20 people and you set it up well, and you get results in, let's say, 18 out of the 20 people, and it's statistically significant, that's useful information, George.
And it can be replicated. So just to quote something you were saying just now, Dr. Candace Pert says, the absence of proof is not proof of absence.
Good point. It is true.
It's very true.
So the bottom line is you have to look at these and you don't have to get concerned that, it wasn't published in the British Medical Journal or the Lancet or the Journal of the American Medical Association. Okay, those are respected journals, I understand. But I can go through the years and show you hundreds and hundreds and hundreds of publications that have been published in those journals that have turned out to be complete crap. So it doesn't mean that they're infallible just because they're in the most respected 4 journals in the world. There's stuff that's published in the Journal of Clinical Nutrition that never makes it to the Lancet, but it's highly valuable information because the study's done properly. This is not easy, George. Sometimes you have to look at if you look at the abstract, you read the conclusion within the abstract, and then I go and dig through the study deeper, and I say whatever conclusion they came to is complete garbage because the data doesn't support their conclusion. So just because they state it doesn't mean it's necessarily true. And this isn't an easy thing to do. It's just not. So the one thing I would say about studies is rely on the experts that are trained to know what to look for, and they actually read the studies and have the time to do that because it's their job.
And going back to what we said,
the average layperson out there just going through scientific studies, it's tough.
Right, and that's why. So going back to what we said earlier, finding the right professional for you when it comes to a doctor, and that could be, like I said, a chiropractor who's focused on nutrition, like yourself, a DO, an integrative medical doctor, functional medicine doctor. What else? Was there anything else in there?
No, you got it.
I think I mentioned them all.
The big thing that you mentioned earlier, though, is the time of the study. This is one thing. When you look at a 6-week trial and it says that taking vitamins doesn't do you any good, or that this diet is exactly the same as that diet for weight loss. Okay, I looked at a study recently that looked at longer-term effects of insulin between 2 different diets, and it tracked them. It graphed them over time. For the first 6 weeks, it was identical. It wasn't until after about 6 to 12 weeks that the 2 lines finally started to diverge, meaning one of the diets had an improvement for the first 6 weeks and then it flattened out. The other diet had the same exact improvement for that same 6 weeks, but then it continued to have further improvements beyond that time period. So if you're going to do it for 6 weeks and then go off, it doesn't matter what diet you choose. Low-calorie diet of any sort will make you lose weight, but if you want long-term results and sustainable results, certain diets are in fact better than other diets.
So speaking of that, the Mediterranean diet, I mentioned this on our last Facebook Live discussion, or maybe it was the one before. There are so many people who tout the Mediterranean diet as being kind of the end-all, be-all, and while it is healthy, there are considerations that were omitted, maybe not intentionally, maybe they just weren't considered. And that is, when you look at the infrastructure of people who live in the Mediterranean, Okay, there are not many cars or streets built for cars. There's a lot of walking, there's a lot of biking. Their activity is completely different than what we have as far as our accessibility of food, how close it is, and we take a car to go maybe 1 block away, right? So there are other considerations when we talk about studies and also a diet. When someone says this is the best diet for you, well, while it's good, did they also have omega-3s or were there omega-6s in there? Because we know that industrial oil omega-6s will lower cholesterol, but it will have zero effect on lowering cardiovascular disease.
That's true. That's a lot there. Also, I don't even know where to start. The good thing about the Mediterranean diet is it has been studied in isolation, not necessarily in the Mediterranean.
Right.
And when you compare it to the standard American diet, you get benefits.
Sure.
Undoubted benefits. Even over, take the standard American diet versus the slightly better diet of the American Heart Association or American Diabetic Association. Crappy diets, slightly better than the standard American diet. When you compare the Mediterranean diet to them, you get better results with the Mediterranean diet. It doesn't mean it's the best diet in the world, because I can show you studies looking at metabolic factors all over the board, insulin resistance, cholesterol, triglycerides, blood sugar, blood pressure, all of them, and show you that a more Paleolithic diet actually beats the Mediterranean diet.
And so does the keto diet.
The keto diet could be, it's part of the Paleolithic style of eating. So
Right.
It doesn't mean just because you get results that are quite good on the Mediterranean diet compared to a terrible diet, it doesn't mean it's the best.
So I want to get into, we don't have time right now, the staples of the way fat works. Actually, all 3 macronutrients. The way they work and what will never change just because someone writes another diet book, all right? I'll also share with you my favorite diet book, or favorite book, it's not a diet book, my favorite book that dispels, completely annihilates all the negative attention on saturated fat and the studies in particular that propose them to be dangerous. Also coming up next, this is my last radio show. I will not be on the ticket anymore. And we're going to open the phones and talk with people if you want to call in. Love to hear from you. 888-787-1310. It's 729 Sports Radio 1310, The Ticket.
The 1920s produced the ketogenic diet for people with epilepsy and has a plethora of scientific proof showing the benefits of rapid fat loss, decreased insulin levels, improved sleep, and brain function. Eating high-fat food while significantly decreasing carbs turns your body into a fat burner from a carb burner. Dr. Myhill said the brain and heart run at least 25% more efficiently on a ketogenic diet. How many times have you been disappointed by fat loss results? Less than optimal organ function due to poor lifestyle choices, slow or minimize desired results on any diet. We created the first and only keto cleanse system to be the fastest fat loss program on the market by combining the correct keto diet with a full body cleanse. Change from being a carb burner to a fat burner today. Visit 21daybodymakeover.com/keto, click on keto cleanse, and receive cleanse supplements, a keto cookbook with desserts such as keto brownies and grocery list, recipes, and exercise videos. That's 21daybodymakeover.com/keto.
735 Sports Radio 1310, The Ticket. George DiGianni, Train Station Fitness Show. Dr. Jeremy Webster is next to me. This is my last day on radio on The Ticket. This is my last show. I teased it during the week that this would be a big surprise. Just moving on to other ventures and growing beyond here. Genetic Direction is growing really well. If you want to call in, I'd love to hear from you. I know there are people that listen all over online, but there are a lot of people who are listening on podcast and not live anymore. 888-787-1310. Right now, Dr. Webster and I are talking about foundational tools in your life that will never change, so you don't have to always grasp for the latest diet or exercise program or exercise equipment. We're talking about how the body processes certain macronutrients that when somebody comes out with another diet or a study to try to influence you away from the way the body works, it's important to recognize and have these foundational tools not to gravitate toward that.
Well, I think the main point of what you just said is that the body doesn't change just because somebody writes a book.
Yeah.
So if you're not embracing how the body works, if a book or a diet or a study doesn't embrace the fundamentals of how the body works, then it's not very valid. I mean, that's the easiest way I can put that. I know you wanted to mention a little bit about fats.
Yeah.
For instance, okay, fats are and always have been one of the key foundational nutrients of the human body. We have tons of tissues in our body that are made of fat, and tons of processes in our body that rely on fats.
Yeah, the brain is made of 60% fat.
The brain and the nervous system, all of your nerves are hugely fat.
Yeah.
So just from a structural standpoint, and even every single one of your cells, George, even your muscle cells, you think, well, muscle's not fat. That's the opposite.
Right.
Your muscle cells have a lining that is made primarily of fat. It's the bulk of the muscle cell is protein, but the lining is fat, and it's the same with your skin cells. It's the same with
So
every
the
other cell in
question
your
is,
body.
what happens when you're devoid of fat throughout the day?
It's about like if you're devoid of protein.
Yeah.
It's one of the structural components in every single one of your cells. Some of those fats, in fact, are essential. Just like in the old days when people would venture from Europe over to the Americas on the ships, they couldn't keep vegetables on these months-long journey,
Yeah.
so they would end up with nothing but salted meats for a long time. They would develop scurvy. That meant they weren't eating vegetables. They weren't getting the vitamin C that they required from those fruits and vegetables, oftentimes, and they develop these disease processes. That's a deficiency in a nutrient because vitamin C is essential. You have to consume it no matter what. The same thing happens with these fats. If you don't consume omega-3s and omega-6s, you eventually develop diseases of deficiency.
So my favorite book that annihilates every single flawed study that speaks poorly about saturated fat is called Super Fuel. It's written by two medical doctors. One, let's see if I can get this guy's last name right, Dr. James DiNicolantonio. I got it, DiNicolantonio, and Dr. Joseph Mercola. I highly recommend buying this book, Super Fuel.
Super Fuel. Never heard of it?
Yes.
Gotta check it out, though.
So now I want to just do the goodbye show. This is my last show if you're just tuning in. I'm leaving radio for other ventures. Genetic Direction is growing fast. I feel blessed to have the team I have had. Also, other professionals that have been on the radio with me, Dr. Webster, Dr. Tim Church. Many people have been on the radio. I want to thank every single one of you. I also want to say goodbye to Craig Rosengarten and Rick Arnett from the T-Box. Love those guys. I'm glad to have had a chance to know you. Also, George Dunham, who had the confidence in me to use my 21-day body makeover program years ago. Lost 50 pounds, did really well with it. Norm also had great success. And Bob Sturm, has used my program at least 10 times. All of these people had a vote of confidence in me, and I can't tell you how appreciative I am of you for doing that. Also, Junior Miller, Corby, and Gordo have also taught me to be able to laugh at myself, make fun of myself. Being made fun of is better than being buried, so nobody knows your name. Jeff Catlin, who's been a great boss because he's always available for guidance, and of course, Dan Bennett, I could never forget, who gave me my start back in 1998.
Wow.
I also want to thank some listeners who have been longtime listeners. Craig in the UK, he listens online. Don in Japan, he lived in America and continues to listen now in Japan. They've been listening over the years. I want to thank also Tom and Luann Schaefer. We became friends from them listening to my show. We've been friends for many years. Craig Brinkerhoff, he's always in our lives. So many people who have tuned in from day one have become friends of mine. I can't mention them all. But also Dr. Webster, like I said, you've been a staple of this show, encouraging people, empowering people to be advocates for fighting for the truth about health and wellness in general.
Thank you, John.
Who do we have on the phone? We have Tina on the phone. Let's go ahead and go to Tina. Tina.
Hello.
Hey, sweet girl.
Hey, Tina.
Hey, Dr. Webster.
Hi.
Hi. I am calling in to say I want to tell you I appreciate your letting me be on the show for so many years, I guess, as co-hosting. And I love you guys very much, and I'm just like, you've had so many great accomplishments, George, over the years, and you know, we've known each other for a very, very, very long time.
28 years.
Yeah, and the first year I didn't like you very much, you know that.
I didn't like me very much.
You either, and but then you started growing on me, and you've been through so much, and you're just a great friend to me, and you've helped so many people through this radio show. You as well, Dr. Webster, and all the great professionals you've had on there. It's just been, I learned so much being on that show, just from all the smarter people, people that were much smarter than me, like way smarter than me. It really helped me in my career, to be honest. So I want to just to let you know I appreciate that opportunity that you gave me.
Tina, love you, thank you, and I have to agree with you. I think I've had a better education on this show than I have with all the certifications I acquired over the years. I really have from the people. I'm sorry?
I tell people that all the time, that some of the best knowledge I got was from being on your show.
Yeah. Well, thanks for calling in and taking time, Tina. I really appreciate that. I know you're up early today, living in a completely different state in Pacific time. So thanks, hon.
My first show ever, 12 years ago, John Hammerly was on from Fox.
Yeah.
And Tina did the fitness tip of the week. I remember.
Yes.
I was like, "Who's this Tina?"
Yeah.
And so it's been great to know Tina and work with Tina all these years.
Thanks, T.
All right, love you guys.
Love you. Bye-bye.
Bye, Tina.
Let's go to Scott. Scott, you are on the ticket.
Good morning, George.
Good morning.
I don't think people realize how good a man this really is. In fact, I was fortunate enough to be one of the few civilians nominated for an e-brake after my debate with a guy about the beef council many years ago. He must have been desperate for guests when he asked me to be on.
I was not desperate. You have a lot to offer. Now I know who this is. I didn't realize it was you, Scotty. You did a great job, because one of the things I like about you is you're extraordinarily physically active. You could eat whatever you want, but I know you eat healthy as well. And it just goes to show, when someone who has a ranch and works it the way you do, how fit you can be, and not have to go to a doctor all the time because you're constantly in balance. So I praise people like you.
I appreciate it, man. I limp a little more than I used to, but that's it's not just necessarily the years. A lot of times it's the mileage.
Yes. All right. Well, Scott, thanks so much for the call.
You're a good man. I'm gonna miss you on the air.
Thank you so much, Scott. Please stay in touch.
Oh, the e-brakes over the years.
Yeah. So who's on next call, Timmy? Let's take it live. You're on the ticket.
What the hell?
Craig.
What are you doing?
I know.
Really?
It's 21 years that I'm here, my friend, and it's genetic direction's growing fast, and I have other focuses. The good thing is I'll be able to continue some of this with Facebook Live. I've been doing with Dr. Webster once a week, and I can do it from anywhere in the world. But yeah, it's time. I've been thinking about this for several months, and I had a talk with Kat last week about it.
So you are a smart guy and got a Harvard degree, and you own a really, really big piece of real estate on the ticket. Why don't you just broker it? Why'd you do this? Just kind of,
Well, you've
Auction
been
it
mentioning
off.
that to me for a long time,
auction it off.
and I don't know that I'm as intelligent as you are when it comes to brokering it. Or maybe I should say, as much as people might think I'm a big promoter of me, I'm just not. I would have the hardest time going out trying to sell my show. I'm just not that guy. I would rather take care of the person, give them the best information so they don't feel like I'm being a salesperson. I've just never been that guy, and I know what I'm good at and what I'm not good at, and that's what I stick with.
All right, so we're now into the genetic business full time, huh?
Yeah, full time. But also make sure you tell your dad, give him my best, and I really appreciate his listening and his commentary over the years.
There's a guy who, it was very, very funny. So he listens to you every week, and he just curses at the internet because he listens to it online. He's 81 years old, and he has this love-hate relationship with you that he doesn't even have with anybody else in the world. So he will probably miss you more than anybody. But we will miss you. We'll probably want to bring you on every so often as an expert fitness guy for anything that happens if Tiger ever gets caught taking something wrong or has a weird injury.
I think
Still
it'd be,
use
thank you for that, Craig. I think it'd be fun just talking about movements in golf and strength and all that anyway. So, yeah, I would love to do that. You have me at your disposal.
Well, you'll be missed.
And you guys too. Thank you so much, really, for your support over the years, everybody here. If you're just listening now, this is my last day on the ticket. I've decided to call it quits. I have a final message for everyone to take care of themselves. Do not rely on others, such as our government to provide accurate information, or studies that you read, or even your own medical doctor. Get many opinions. Be your own advocate, but don't be your own advocate and then take your own advice. You want to send that advice to others who know more than you do, especially when it's non-mainstream information. You want to bring it to a non-mainstream professional. A naturopath doctor, a chiropractor, an integrative medicine, functional medicine doctor are considered non-mainstream. Lastly, be your own cheerleader because no one else will. Love you all. God bless. 746 Sports Radio 1310 The Ticket.